The following is a presentation of the Radio Misfits Podcast Network.
From the birthplace of modern winemaking, Sonoma, California, welcome to The Winemakers. Local experts Sam Couturi, Bart Hansen, and Brian Casey, along with host John Myers, invite you to listen in as they discuss all facets of winemaking. So sit back, pour yourself a glass, and let's hear what the guys have to say this week.
A beautiful rainy Sonoma pour by Sam Couturi. Hey, everybody, I'm John Myers. Welcome to The Winemakers. Sitting here with Bart Casey and Bart Casey. How nice is
Bart
Casey and Brian Hansen?
I mean,
just interchangeable.
And here we were just, trying to stop everything so we didn't talk too much before we introduced our guests. Nice introduction.
Why would we do that and change up from the other 275 episodes? Well, welcome to The Winemakers. Brian Casey, that's my buddy, Bart Hansen, and Kira Ballotta, winemaker and owner at Olivia Brion and Cantadora. Welcome to Sonoma.
Thank you.
On a rainy morning. Wow.
I started in the cellar here, so, just making my way around.
Perfect.
In the snow in the cellar, though? It's raining. It's not snowing anymore.
Some of your photos were great. Skiing in your vineyards and stuff. That was excellent.
It was the craziest story that I've heard. I haven't said this to you, Bart. Corbin Ming of Corbin Cameron left Yountville on Thursday evening,
right
at about 9:00 at night, and it took him 3 hours to get up the hill. He got stopped. He was in a car, not in a truck, I guess. The firefighters made him leave his car on the side of the road, put him in this car, and that's where a ton of those photos were coming from. These firefighters on Cavedale and Trinity Thursday night. There's already 6 inches of snow on the ground,
right?
And then if you've ever been to Corbin Cameron's Moonridge Vineyard, you know how crazy this is. They dropped him off at the bottom of his driveway, which is the steepest driveway I've ever been on.
Excellent.
And it's at least a half a mile, if not more. And this is over DMs. Corbin goes, all I had was a headlamp, a bottle of water, and my will to live. And I was like, sounds like a Jack London story, which is, Jack London hung out up there. It was, it's been a wild few days of weather. That's for sure. Snowballs on the mountain. And the snow level's just a little bit above Mayacamas mountains right now. The snow level's 3,000 feet. This far south, so it hasn't really warmed up.
Yeah, I drove up to dropped off Dane at one of his friends, and they live out kind of off of River Road, and I got the full shot of the hills, Alexander Valley Hills. Right. It looks like the Sierra foothills.
Right. It looks like the Alps.
It's crazy.
It's 7 inches of rain so far this week.
Yeah.
Well, what you don't know is it's Premier Napa Valley this week, so we actually imported the snow for the aesthetics per Napa style.
The mustard wasn't enough. The mustard's played out. What do we need? We need snow-capped mountains.
We need higher bids and prettier views.
Yeah, it worked. Apparently it worked, though.
Yeah. That was looks like Colorado around here.
Yeah.
And so on the mustard with the snow-capped mountains, Arnold Drive, right there at the Leverone's property.
Most dangerous stretch of road in America right now.
Yeah, people going out the gate that was locked. People opening the gate, going out into their field,
pulled over on the side of the road. Yeah. Taking pictures,
U-turns in the middle of Arnold Drive.
It's like my normal route home. I've been avoiding it because it's so people just pulling. It's worse than it ever was at Buckland's property with the mustard and the tourists. It's just people pulling over and taking. They're stunning photos. They have to be. Right. The oak trees, the mustard, whatever. I'm cold. I'm sick of it.
The only picture I'm bummed that I didn't get. I was trying to get the cherry blossoms in the foreground on a cherry tree, and then the snow in the background to just kind of show how crazy it was. That it was this we thought spring was coming.
The question is those mountain vineyards, these vines are getting cold. Is it going to push back bud break? I know the people I've talked to have said the nice thing is everything's truly dormant, nothing's pushing, nothing like that. But
sap had to be. sap is flowing up
Right.
with the weather we had leading up to
You
this.
think so?
It's truly unprecedented to have this much snow
Here.
this time of year. So I
My expectation is definitely a later vintage with higher yields, but with warmer temperatures in the spring, that could all change.
Right.
So
yeah, it's
like we think something, and then we haven't had a vintage with any sort of consistency for a while. So
since 20 since Jesus turned water into wine, it's been all downhill since then.
we were so smug in California for so long. We didn't have to deal with hail. Actually, did you see last year the Rhone had a hail tornado?
Yes.
That was fascinating. I mean, talk about...
They bury weather stories, though, there, also.
Yeah.
There have been rainstorms and hailstorms in Burgundy in August that they've never acknowledged. So,
Well,
it's a better marketing company than the Napa Valley marketing group, right?
Which is the
best.
Which is the best. Right? Everything's always perfect.
And I know we have a guest today, but can we talk about something kind of bizarre that I saw? And Sam, I kind of wanted to get your take on it. So in Champagne, they're using pigs in the vineyards.
Oh, I saw that article too.
Did you see that?
Yeah.
They said that sheep are lazy, that they will go through and just eat the stuff that they want to eat, but that pigs eat everything. I thought it was kind of interesting. I never heard that before.
I think it's because a Napa company's probably invested in pigs.
Well, I mean, Hanzel's using pigs, and they've run them through the vineyard, but they have to be a non-rutting pig breed.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we're all looking for the perfect ruminating animal for the vine. If the sheep are too lazy and the goats the pigs are destructive.
But aren't they smart too? Aren't pigs smarter than sheep? Isn't that the sort of the silver lining of sheep? Is you can kind of corral the sheep in different
They
ways?
say they are.
Yeah.
Who says the pigs or the sheep?
But I've seen the pigs, I think, at Topless Creek, Jason uses the pigs, but in the forest. It's like a deforestation.
Yeah,
project.
that's what they're
with
doing at
Hanzel.
Hanzel. Yeah, I would. Even the sheep and the goats kind of terrify me because, you're letting not a wild animal, just a domesticated animal, but you're putting an animal that isn't like a fine tool, kind of a blunt object, out into your vineyard where things like little changes mean, especially this time of year, can be drastic differences by the end of the growing season. So I would not. The sheep seem like they're working.
Right.
I don't think I would do pigs. But you know what? It's Champagne. They can do whatever the fuck they want. And they're still going to sell it all.
Do the vines ever get eaten?
Well, I mean, again, if you leave the sheep and goats out there when there's green stuff growing, sure, they'll eat them.
Oh, yeah.
The goats would probably eventually start chewing on
Goats will eat the irrigation hoses whatever else.
Not smart goats.
Seems chewy.
Yeah. No. Well, when you leave the goats in charge of the mechanical harvesters, that's really...
Only the smart.
Wow.
I mean, labor issues are bad, but I don't know if they've gotten that bad.
There's just a real mess out there.
No, I would say keep your pigs in the forest. I don't know.
Let them hunt up truffles.
Truffles.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no,
exactly.
that's the thing is the pigs eat the truffles.
Right.
They'll stop using the pigs for the truffle hunting because the pigs find them, and as you would if you were digging and found truffle, you'd eat it before anybody else found it. At least I would.
All right. Well, Brian's already finished this first glass
this was
of
such
wine.
a Brian wine, first of all.
Well,
You look
welcome,
at the wine-
Kira.
So let's
Thank
get
you.
into
Let's talk about wine.
Speaking of truffles.
How did you get to Napa?
So I started in finance. I was valuing mines, as most winemakers begin. No, so I wanted to work on Wall Street when I was in college, and I graduated at 2008, so that was a great year to start on Wall Street.
Okay. But grew up where and went to college where?
I grew up in Sacramento, so my family's been in California for 5 generations inexplicably at this point. And I wanted to get out, go see the world. Went up to Seattle and I went to University of Washington, and I loved economics and wanted to get a practical degree in that field. So chose finance. And I just had this fantasy of being a trader on Wall Street. I wanted to work at the floor of the stock exchange. And as I saw less and less people working on the floor of the stock exchange, that dream started to take flight. And then I was like, okay, well, I'll work at a hedge fund or something, sexy like that. And so I started doing that in college and doing internships in finance. And then I graduated and went and worked in a mutual fund for about a year, and I watched the stock market nosedive 50%, sitting at a desk with 4 screens in front of me. It was a very exciting day.
I know someone who was doing the same sort of thing.
It was a marvel. So I knew my job was probably not going to.
You were much more focused in college than I was.
I think that was the problem. Now I'm in wine, so it was just like I was very, very focused for a long time and had this linear career trajectory. And then my first harvest was like, well, I never took a semester abroad, so I'm going to make this horrible financial decision and start working harvest. But so I don't know. It's, the jury's out on if that was a smart decision or not. But yeah, so I started in finance, and then I found myself in another job in San Francisco a couple years after the recession, valuing mines. And
valuing mines.
What does that mean?
Yeah.
So that
For
means
those
I
of
was
us that-
so you look at this is why you
For those of us who weren't quite so focused in
this
college.
is why you brought me on the podcast, right? We're going to talk about gold and bauxite. Yeah. So you value a mine by looking at the projection of assets in the ground. So you think, oh, there's this much gold and it requires this much resources in order to extract that from the ground. And then you look at a year-to-year basis of what the plan is for that mine, and then you discount that back using whatever interest rate you would have to finance the project with. And then you come up with the value of that mine. And so we actually use that philosophy for wine, which
right.
is why
do you use that?
Yeah. So we valued. So my boss came up with a way to value land and take a part of that value and attribute it to an intangible asset. So like a brand name is an intangible asset. And if you purchase a brand name, you can depreciate it against your taxes for 10 years. Now, this is a tax podcast. And so
this is fascinating.
Actually, it's the season.
So yeah, exactly. It's relevant. But if you buy land, you can't depreciate it. It's a non-depreciable asset. So really big wineries like Gallo that are buying big expensive vineyard sites want to take a portion of that land value and change it into a depreciable asset. So that's what we did, is we found a way, and we had to defend it with the SEC, to say this portion of the value is attributed to Napa Valley or attributed to Sonoma County or whatever as part of the purchase. And the way we did that is we looked at what a wine project would be like if you put California on the label, and then what the wine project, the value of that project would be if you put Napa Valley on the label.
How much of that is Napa, and could you do it in Sonoma now?
I think you can do it in Sonoma now, because of one of the original projects that I worked on was Edna Valley, and I think I would argue that Sonoma is at least as valuable. Certainly parts of it are more valuable.
What do you think, Vicky?
But I did the Stag's Leap acquisition, and I did an Edna Valley acquisition and a few others. And I thought I had this fantasy. I was, like 26. I had this fantasy of being a wine VP. I thought that would be a fun title to have. And so I went out and I tried to be the managing director of wine as my end goal. And I realized I would have to get every wine deal in the industry if I wanted that to be my primary role, because they weren't, these large wine deals weren't super frequent. So I gave that up and I worked at Constellation. So I went over to Constellation and thought I could take the sort of hybrid approach to my interest in wine that was spurred by these wine valuation projects and go work at a big wine company. So I worked in like the consulting side of Constellation. I worked on the national pricing team for about 1.5 years. And I realized after, one, my job didn't really change that much. I was still just using a lot of spreadsheets, and I was talking about Chardonnay instead of bauxite and aluminum and gold and oil and gas. And so it didn't really change the functionality of my job that much. It wasn't giving, wasn't it wasn't the romantic side of wine. It was just the other side of wine. So I went into my boss's
actual
office,
side of wine.
the actual side of wine. And in the meantime, I had gone up to Napa Valley. I'd met a winemaker that produced a couple small projects. And I just started to work on the side on the weekends, come up and wash barrels, do whatever menial tasks I was qualified to do at that point, and learn about wine. And I just thought it would be my fun, eccentric side hobby.
Was wine in your life at that point?
I was drinking wine. I'd always enjoyed wine, but it was coming up here and working with a small, in a small facility and getting hands-on experience that really spurred me to want to, just throw down my cards and go for it full time. But that was definitely part of it. So that was in 2010. So I was working in finance and I was coming up to the Napa Valley on the weekends learning about wine. Then I quit, tried to, make it work with Constellation for about a year and a half. Learned a lot, got a real top-down approach to our industry, but ultimately the day-to-day was not different than my prior job, and I wanted to be more in the cellar. I wanted to be more into production than I was. So I just quit and I started working harvests. And my first harvest was with The Prisoner. Yeah. So.
Okay, I got so many questions.
So was that from a connection to Constellation?
No, that was a blind application. I think my career in finance gave me a lot of kind of cool opportunities in wine because I used those skills, like my spreadsheet skills or PowerPoint or data organization skills, really to help these larger projects. So when I worked with The Prisoner, I was doing the, $14 an hour job or whatever, where you go and you sample the vineyards. But I was working very intimately with the winemaker and the assistant winemaker on improving their spreadsheets and improving how they manage their many, many vineyard sites. And it was right after the Dave Finney sale. So there was a lot of sort of data movement and whatnot. And so rather than it being a 3-month internship, it was a 9-month internship because I stuck around for a lot longer to help them as long as I could. Cool. And then I started taking classes at that point, in chemistry and biology and all these things that I missed in undergrad. And then I started working with Quintessa because they had a new viticulturist who's actually the viticulturist over at Matthias and now Caleb Mosley. And he was running a whole bunch of trials on their project and really needed someone like me to come and help manage all of that data in that vineyard. And so then I got this long internship with Quintessa where I was managing our analysis of that vineyard for Quintessa and then working in the cellar there. So it was a lot of I was learning as I was going, but I was still using this former skill set to get more opportunities.
Wait, so I got a few questions. One of them, because I think it's directly related to California history. What mines are you valuing? Is this? No, I'm serious. Because we vacation every year, we go up to basically to gold country.
Yeah.
And I know there's still gold in them in our hills, but is there people still to this day, companies that look for gold mines and silver mines and
so most of I believe, and I haven't looked at this for a while, but I believe it's illegal to mine in California. There's quarries, but I don't think you can mine gold here.
At least it's probably prohibitively
regulatorily
difficult.
So
Nevada probably.
Yeah. So we had a lot of mines in terms of the United States. It was Nevada, Alaska, Texas, some parts of the interior of the country. And they were often different projects. There would be the core thing you were mining, gold. And then there would be all these tertiary metals that would also come out of the ground. So a lot of the projects, the biggest ones we were valuing, we valued the largest copper mine in the world to come on board, which was out of Mongolia. And then we would value big projects for Rio Tinto in Brazil and stuff. My managing director at that time was a mining engineer. So it was a really interesting way to start in really any industry because you immediately take this top-down approach to what is the reason I loved and I still like the concepts of it, valuing companies, is because you have to value it into perpetuity. that's how you come up with a discounted cash flow. So you value, like, you have 5, 10, 15 years of projections, and then you come up with this final number that assumes that company is going into perpetuity, and then you discount it backwards from there. So I'd have to like show you on a spreadsheet. I did not bring my computer because I thought we were drinking wine today.
To be honest, you can show us on a spreadsheet. We're probably still not going to get it.
That's super cool, though. And what a great, useful tool to then translate to vineyards, though. That's a really cool thing to have learned.
Well, what I'm thinking about here is in sort of the time since you were doing that work, all these big vineyard purchases,
acquisitions,
like Gallo buying Stagecoach.
Right.
And I'm sure that tool that you came up with for figuring out the brand value of the vineyard, so that they could take some depreciation on it and take a little tax.
The vineyard, the valley.
But yeah, so you have a brand named vineyard,
Right.
Well,
has even more value than an appellation,
Right.
or a county or a state.
Well, does Moon Mountain mean anything then? Extra?
Monte Rosso certainly does. Moon Mountain is climbing in.
I think
brand value.
what you would have to do is, the way that we did it is we proved that this certain area was worth more than like the larger area around it. So that was a pretty easy case with Stag's Leap, but I think that you would have a more uphill battle with Stagecoach, because the Napa Valley and the AVA that it's in, Atlas Peak, is already a very valuable asset, and it's more proven. And when you're defending a valuation of something, you have to have a lot of examples. You have to have a lot of kind of reference points for that valuation to prove it. And so there would be more reference points for Atlas Peak as a valuation, and you could then for a particular vineyard. Yeah. So I would, so that would be, some of the issues with that. But it definitely helps when I was thinking about my brands that I wanted to work with and produce. It did help me think about what creates value for those brands or those wines. And that's not what drives me. I'm, just as, I don't know, fanciful as any other winemaker. I just love the wine from this particular site, and I want to make it, and I fantasize about it. And I have this, I set myself up, I think at this point, as being this very analytical person, but I had this other side of myself that was really into English. And I found myself in these, literature classes in college where we were looking at, old English texts and stuff. And I was just like, here, come on, you got to focus. Like, you have to pick a side. And one side made money and the other side didn't. So, and then
everybody, you have it.
And then I just threw that away,
Still got to do the work.
Screw this, I'm going to make wine.
I just like, this was fun, but now I'm going to switch over and, but so the wine that we're drinking, speaking of that, the wine that we're drinking is one of the first Olivia Brion wines that I started making, and it does play into that kind of fantasy. Olivia Brion, just to give us a little quick overview, since we're listening to this, not watching it, is a brand that tells the story of women from history. And Olivia Brion's a fictional character in each. If the brand was a novel, me enjoying writing, it kind of plays into that. Each label would be a chapter in her life. So I like to highlight a fun adventure that a trailblazing woman from history would have taken on the label and tell that story. And Olivia Brion, sort of the main character, as the stand-in. And this wine that we're drinking right now is the Taquin White Blend. Taquin's an old French word. It means playful, vexing, mischievous. And it kind of, it alludes to the wine along with the story, because I think this is a really fun, playful white wine. It was more, I love white wine, but I find myself disappointed in a lot of the iterations of it in California, because there's the kind of the overripe model and whatnot, or the very searing acidity. It's going to take it off of your enamel, off your teeth type of thing. And I love Rhone whites, and so I thought, well, I think I can make something like that in California, but I have to find the right combination of things. So it was more of like a white wine I had in my head. And I spent, I've done a lot of different combinations of vineyard sources and varietals for this particular wine.
What's the blend?
So the blend of this final one, and this is the first time I've done back-to-back the same vineyard sources, is 52% Viognier, 36% Gewürztraminer, and 12% Chardonnay. And the Viognier is from Shake Ridge Ranch, and the Gewürztraminer is from almost 50-year-old vines in Russian River Valley, right on Olivet Road. And then the 12% of Chardonnay is from the Dry Creek AVA. So it's just my approach to this wine is trying to put in a bottle what I love about white wine, which is a lot of perfumey aromas and a really nice arc of acidity, and then ending on roundness rather than bitterness. So just kind of smoothing out the palate so that you can kind of continue to enjoy it. So this is my white wine fantasy.
I thought it was Chardonnay when we poured it, but then I tasted it and it was completely different and beautiful. Really nice. That Viognier, that's what gives it the bouquet, right?
Absolutely. Well, the Gewürztraminer consistently has these honeysuckle aromas that are just so fragrant, but it makes kind of a simple palate on its own. And so the Viognier, I pick it. It's a bowl-shaped black, so I pick it when it's ripe, kind of in the middle of the bowl, so it gets a little caramelized notes on top, a little kind of slightly ripe peel, citrus peel notes at the bottom of it, and it actually makes quite a complex wine just in that lone fermenter, and then adding that sort of those hedonistic, aromas from the Gewürztraminer. And then when I try to just do those two on their own, it is a little severe on the finish. So I just add that little tiny bit of Chardonnay to kind of round it. Yeah. So.
Yeah, I love it. It's totally awesome.
This is totally a Brian wine.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. I saw it on the website with just the blend.
So did I.
This is going to be a Brian wine.
Hope, fingers crossed. Hope she's bringing it.
The idea of blending Viognier and Gewürztraminer seems to just like nobody. I don't know if anybody else is doing it, but it seems like it makes a lot of sense. With those sort of the simplicity of Gewürztraminer on the palate, but it's super interesting aromatically. Yeah. And then you add that, the honey to the peaches of Viognier, and then a little malolactic fermentation on the Chardonnay to soften the finish.
Nice mouthfeel.
Yeah, totally brilliant concept.
Totally.
It's like you really analytical and figured these things out way better than somebody else. I don't know how you did it.
I think it was just, I had the opportunity to work with these different blocks and tasted them, and then just kind of, it took a lot of just playing with it over the years. I had tried a little bit of orange muscat. I had tried some Vermentino. I tried, just different things. And the Vermentino had this really kind of metallic taste that you had to kind of deal with, and, just different things. And it all is... for me, I just love California. So I'm just trying to showcase what California can do that is, different from different parts of the world. And that's, for me, that's kind of this wine. But then the next one we're going to taste is a Russian River Pinot Noir, innovative.
Groundbreaking.
Groundbreaking.
How did you come up with the idea?
Wait, and before we pour that, how did you get that first? How did you get in contact with someone that said you could come up and just wash barrels out?
So I was living in San Francisco at that time, and my best friend lived in the house of this guy whose family was pretty wealthy, and they had a property up. She rented a room basically, and his family owned a vineyard and a little winery in Napa. And as I was getting into wine, I would see that. He had these kind of wine spectators in his apartment, and he was like, I didn't know him that well, but we started talking a little about wine, and he said, oh, you like this, you should go meet my winemaker. And I was like, that's a pretty odd statement, but okay, like, please do tell. And he just gave me a phone number and said, oh, if you want to go, he makes a little, we don't make a lot of wine, but a little wine. So I went up and just took, on a lark, met this winemaker in Napa, and I started working.
Who was that?
David Mahaffey.
Okay.
Yeah, and so he had founded Olivia Brion on the Wild Horse AVA, and it just had 2 SKUs, just Pinot and Chardonnay. And then I just started working with him on the side. The 10 vintages when I met him, the 11 vintages was the first one that I really helped with. Mainly dusting all the mold off of Pinot from all the rain that vintage. But wow. But it was if that vintage didn't turn you off from the industry, then
And can you clarify
Going
where
into the wine business in 2011 is like going into the finance industry in 2008.
I know.
Really nailed those.
I had some real great starts to my career. Yeah.
Can you clarify for our listeners and maybe a few people at the table where Wild Horse appellation is?
I never heard of it before.
I'd heard of it, but
It's
now
in the-
I think I know where it is.
It's in the southern part of Napa, so laterally very similar to Carneros, but you
Right.
go up the hill into
So
what's
it's
called
kind of
Green
American
Valley.
Canyon?
No, I mean it's above. It's like the elevation is about 1,200 feet or so, so it's above. So it's kind of like if you went just south from Atlas Peak. So if by a what is it, a dove's flight or something? If you fly slightly
As a crow
south,
flies?
as a crow flies
Dove is
slightly
much
south, yeah.
romantic way.
It was-
Yeah, but
But
much
doves
more
kind of-
sporadic.
And doves don't
Yeah.
fly in a straight line like a crow does. Yeah.
Crows-
Crows focus.
Learn something new every day. so
This portion of the podcast brought to you by the Audubon Society.
and doves.
And Prince.
Well, yeah, I was
When
going to
doves
say,
cry.
get Prince reference in there.
So the next one, so the project was really started around Pinot, which it makes sense for us to be drinking a Pinot. Thank you for pouring that, Bart. So the and that vineyard site that burned in the 17 fires and was kind of eminently going to be sold after that. So I started working with Olivia Brion in 16, wanting to just make some commercial wine on the side. I was still working in, larger wineries at the time. So I made a couple SKUs and just took financial responsibility for those SKUs. I made a Shake Ridge Tempranillo and I made a Mendocino Rosé, a direct to press rosé. I came back from Provence and I was just like, I want to do that. And
Yeah.
that was,
So wait, did you work in Provence?
no,
just-
I just visited. It was my last romantic trip with my husband before we started having kids. So,
So
now we have two. Yeah.
so David had started the brand, and you
And I started to work with it, and he was looking at retirement. I
Right.
think the fires were definitely a component of that. That was really demoralizing in 17, and then of course in 20. But he had already started on that trajectory.
So, I mean, that's pretty cool because you obviously, the little bit we've gotten to know you, you can see that, like, you obviously identified with the Olivia Brion idea.
I like telling the historical stories. I love talking about history, and so I had fun with those
Cool.
stories. And then I wanted, when I started making the wine, instead of just using the same label over and over, I wanted to take her on new adventures. And then I kind of shifted the marketing for Olivia Brion to being this woman that goes on all these different adventures, and those adventures are inspired by the lives of real women. So on the Taquin label, we just had the life of the labels inspired by the life of Annette Kellerman, who was this Australian Olympic swimmer from the early 1900s, who really had to create swimwear for women in order to swim, because at the time you had to wear this full tunic, the one from your collarbone to your ankles, often made out of wool. And the first time she attempted the English Channel, she was forced to wear that, and her male competitors were allowed to swim nude. I'm not sure you would want to be nude in the English Channel, but
Somehow the wool seems
but
like it might
suffices
be
to
all right,
say, it was
other than the drowning part of it.
yeah, it was a little uneven. So she really created swimwear that out of just different materials she cut up and whatnot, so that women could swim, when women and athlete weren't words that went together at the time.
Right.
So she and one of the fun parts of her story that I immortalize on the label is in when she was in Massachusetts, she was kind of on the beach in one of her swimsuits and got arrested for wearing a too small bathing suit. And it was of her own design. And I actually highlight one that's a little racier than on the label than what she even wore. But she took that bit of notoriety and started a line of swimwear called Annette Kellerman's, and that's the genesis of modern swimwear for women. So, it's a trailblazer, a pioneer, and a fun lady. she actually choreographed swim sequences for early Hollywood silent films too. So she just had this really
Wait, is
you
that
know, fun
the
life.
where there's a bunch of them and they shoot it from up above? And
and they're
that
in like
stuff
big
is
shells and like
fascinating.
And she has, if you look up Annette Kellerman, she has some wild swimsuits that she designed for Hollywood in Warsaw, and she was the first woman to appear quote nude in a film. She had she didn't like
her shoulders were
like she had a like a mermaid tail and her hair over her body and stuff, but she was so she had fun. She had a fun life. And she made it so we could swim and not drown, so that's useful.
and that's the white blend.
That's the white blend. So that's Taquin. And then the Pinot was the original story that David had come up with. And his inspiration was the life of Annie Chomsky. She was she rode her bike around the world, and she's the first recorded woman to ride a bike around the world. And, she didn't ride across the Atlantic Ocean. She took a boat, but she rode as much as she could. She had
the first chef cycle.
She got a couple guys to bet her $10,000 that she wouldn't finish this ride, and that was about 3 years' salary for a guy at the time. This was in the late 1800s, and she checked in with all the American embassies across the world, and she collected. So she made quite a bit of money. And she changed her last name on the ride to advertise a water company. So she changed her last name to Londonderry. So she's known kind of in history as Annie Londonderry to advertise Londonderry Water Company. Because any article,
sponsored athlete.
She was a sponsored athlete, and she only had a few days cycling experience before she left.
Sponsored athlete as opposed to modern day sellout.
Yeah, she was an early influencer.
Right. Early.
I'd take the money.
Yeah, those, it was
my last name to be
right.
It was a kind of a, as a mom of two, she had 3 young kids under 6 too. So I understand the impetus of wanting to ride around the world. But
just keep riding before they learn how to ride bikes.
Just keep going.
Keep going. Get on the boat.
Like, do you pick what is the shortest route, or do you pick what is the nicest weather? You know what I mean? Like, how would you go about determining how the route you're going to take for that? What are countries that aren't at war currently?
Right.
That
which countries are going to let a woman ride a bike through
flattest roads?
Exactly
women,
no
women
mountains.
Women would get arrested for wearing pants in different areas at that point. So it was a wild thing to do at that point, and today it would feel kind of insane to do. So. It's just, really, really a trailblazing lady, quite literally. And this wine, so with the Pinot, I really wanted to use several different winemaking techniques
Wait, why?
Just because I liked when I first make a wine, I like to create kind of a benchmark vintage for myself. So the 18 was sort of a benchmark vintage where I made it very classic to traditional California Pinot Noir making. So I just stemmed everything, open top fermenters for a couple of weeks, long barrel aging, but very light touch. And I wanted to bring a little more tannin out of that site. And so I used some whole cluster. I used a fermenter with 50% whole cluster. I used a fermenter with 30% stem addition. So just slightly different tannin profile. And then I used the traditional whole berries. And then on top of that, I used about 20% French oak just to kind of frame the wine nicely, not give it an overpowering vanilla flavor or anything like that.
Yeah.
And I try to keep the alcohols on the lower side just because I feel like when they get too high, you lose some of the aromas. And for Olivia Brion, I really like to have those intense aromatics in the wines.
Yeah,
So.
no, it's great. Yeah.
So I
I
noticed
love the distinction between whole cluster and stem addition. And I think that's really an important note that for winemakers and wine drinkers out there, there's a difference between whole cluster and then de-stemming and adding stems, which I'm assuming what you did is you added stems back into the fermentation.
Yeah.
There's a little more control there, a little more like...
Well, I was able to taste the stems and really look at the, closely at the lignification and decide, because I don't have a dogma around stem addition, but I don't want to add, a tremendous amount of green to the wine.
Right.
And it is a source of green tannin, just like seeds are. So, I look at it as not, I'm not going to do a whole cluster every year. I didn't do a lot of whole cluster last year because it ripened so quickly that it didn't lignify the stems at all. The grapes ripened so fast and then it left the stems behind. So it's definitely a year by year,
and that's more than ever. You have to be that way because vintages are varying so much.
Reference first part of show. Thank you.
Right.
Yeah, who knows if we'll be using stems in 2023? Who knows if we're gonna we could totally be looking at a cold, wet cycle through the season.
Totally.
You know, I mean, it could be one of those years where we have those cold, wet. I mean, not that anybody's going to complain about it, but it could be a 2011 kind of situation.
Sure.
I mean, the 2011 winter was cold, wet, heavy snow winter. Late spring, never really, rain during harvest.
Yep.
We could totally be setting one of those up, or it could, the sun could come out on March 15th and never go away until December.
How was the yield and quality in 2011?
Yields were lower. Quality was kind of a mixed bag. It was classically like a quote unquote winemaker's vintage.
Yeah, that's what I was just
Yeah.
going to say. I was like, it sounds trite, but I just felt like there was just so much variation in whoever was managing those pick decisions and those fermentations.
Yeah.
And
I mean, the vintage kind of got ignored, but there were very good wines that came out of 2011.
well, it was one of my favorite vintages from my prior winery. So I went through different harvests, and then I worked on the winemaking team at Alpha Omega for 4 years. And when I was leaving, you get a discount on the wine.
Skipped over that part.
Yeah, we like fast
What was that
forward.
discount? Need some of that
Wait,
discount.
what?
Yeah, so I it was one of my favorite vintages that I tasting that years later was, I thought, quite elegant.
How many years
So-
were you at Alpha Omega and how
I
did
was
that
at
happen?
15. So I jumped around harvest, and then I came back. I managed the lab at Molly Duker in Australia. And then I wanted to come back, and I thought I was just going to do another harvest. Frankly, I was looking at applying for graduate school, and I ended up getting my full-time job with AO just on their winemaking team as their production assistant. And then I worked my way up over 4 years and ran Enology research. So we were chasing our 100-point score from Robert Parker at the time. It always kind of like edged it, not gotten it. So, and we had a big budget
Is
for
that an
Enology
important
research.
thing?
Well,
99 plus.
99 plus. Yeah. It's not 100. It's not 100.
Call
I
from the
know.
vineyard owner going, how come it's a 99 plus and not 100?
I know. So I got to do a lot of these trials. Again, the analytics I got to do. I one, aromatics in wine is a real big, just draw, right? You always want to do everything you can to
Well,
try
it's what
to.
invites you in, right?
Right.
Like, there's a lot of wines that you go to smell them and you're like, oh, I don't smell anything, and then you drink it and you're like, oh, there's something there on the palate, but the aromas are what draw you into the wine.
and
It's
that's-
like the come hither.
And it's one of the challenges, right, for Napa Valley, for Cabernet winemaking, I would say, across the board, because Cabernet winemaking, to get a lot of the silky notes, the glycerin, you need a hotter fermentation. But when you get hotter fermentations, you start to lose the aromas because your evaporative loss is faster. So I found this company in Canada that used this membrane technology on top of fermenters that would push the volatile aromas back into the wine and then release the CO2. And then I found this cooperage that was willing to work with me. We bought several, barrels from them. We did a lot of barrel fermentations at Alpha Omega due to space, but also the tannin profile that we were looking for. And so we would take the heads off and do the fermentations in the barrels. And so I worked with a cooperage to come up with a punch down device that would go inside of the barrels. So it would be like a stainless steel head with a punch down device. And then
But you're using manually.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, you're doing manual punch
Yeah,
downs.
yeah,
And then
yeah.
I worked with this Canadian company to create this membrane for the top of these 4 barrels, would be on a pallet. And then I had this kind of little brain thing on top that was the membrane that would push the volatile aromatics back into
It was
the
like a
wine.
shower cap in some.
It was more of like a, I don't know, it was more like a black box. It was more like a big kind of box thing with the membrane inside.
All the barrels.
Yeah, it kind of sat in the middle of the barrel fermentations. And then there was these, punch down devices that were, you would work very slowly
okay.
to
Yeah,
kind of
yeah.
rotate the cap inside of the barrels. And so, I left. So that was in the 18 vintage, and I left after that to do Olivia Brion full time. So I wasn't there for the blending session to know for sure, but that was the wine we got 100 points on. So
mic drop. I'm out of here. There's your 100 points.
Here's your 100 points. I'm gonna go make some peanut.
So wait a minute though. My question is
it was the Tokalat. It was the Tokalat. So yeah.
What did the cellar crew think of the membranes and all of that? Was that a like?
I mean, I think they thought I was a little bit crazy, but I mean, I was like, I was
Not anymore.
I was managing it. I would go and punch it down and check it every day
And show them, it's not that much of a pain.
Yeah, well, I don't know. They probably still thought I was a pain because I would do lots of. I was just always, trying a ton of different things. One of my favorite projects was I worked with Luca Vietti in Italy. I wanted to do a submerged cap trial, but I had this like fantasy in my head of how to use a porta tank for a submerged cap trial, and then designed this sort of grate to sit into it. And I was emailing with him and found someone to fabricate it for me. And then that is probably still like in the yard at Alpha Vegas somewhere. My submerged cap device is
Currently getting rained on.
I saw that on Craigslist last week.
I know.
Worldclassifieds.com.
And then, and I remember the cellar team, they would always see my submerged cap fermentation would always bubble over, and I'd have to go siphon out of it and dump the wine into another tank, and they'd always come up to my office like, here, your wine's bubbling over again, and I have to go and siphon it out.
They weren't going to do that for you.
Yeah, like, it's
You're on
your
your own.
problem.
You're on that one.
This is not our problem.
I know.
All right. That's
So yeah,
awesome.
so I got, thank you, or you're pointing at the Pinot. Thank you.
All right, where would we start on these next three wines?
So I have the Cantadora wines. So these are new. So this is a great segue because this was me just as a winemaker in a playground type of thing. I really love Rhones. They're one of my they're the driving force in the industry for me. I just love a great Rhone blend.
Same here.
Exactly. They're wonderful. They're just the best. They're the friendliest wines. You can drink them with everything. And anyways, I love Rhodes, and I love Shake Ridge Ranch. I love working with Ann Kramer, and I wanted to do something really special when I finally got the Rhodes. You have to be on the wait list for the vineyard and whatnot. And so I started working with her in 16, but it took me a while to get Rhodes.
Does she need to talk with Jasmine about the fig getting in there?
Who? Oh,
Yeah.
some of these wines?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought you meant with Ann Kramer. I'm like, wait a minute. I think we have our own sources. I think we're good on the Rhones.
But yeah, so the Rhones, so I wanted to, so this first wine is Cantadora the Sage. And so each of these wines feature a woman from the Bay Area that is doing something really profound for our community and often novel. So it makes a good story to talk about. It's maybe something that, doesn't get its expose in the New Yorker or something like that.
And how do you select the women? And then what is that conversation like when you reach out to them and you tell them what your plan is?
Put your face on a wine label.
Right.
It was, well,
And how many cases do they get for free?
That's all my questions. Well, so this wine, so I found the women. So originally when I lived in San Francisco, I was I volunteered at the domestic violence shelter La Casa de las Madres. And I was a shelter volunteer. I'd go in and mainly do child care for the women that were at the shelter so they could go to therapy and do, different things. And you go through 40 hours of training and you really learn a lot about the dynamics.
Incredibly nice of you.
Well, it wasn't, it was just, I was raised by a single mom, and I just feel very strongly about giving back to women that, when I was working at the shelter, I can tell you, they look exactly like anyone that it's just one, one decision away from, being in that situation. And so, I've always wanted to give back in that way. And so when I was working in San Francisco, I was volunteering there. And then when I started making commercial wine, I started giving it back to them as part of their gala event each year as a donation. And then when I came up with the Cantadora project, because the success of Olivia Brion, people really liked the stories of women and were open to that. And people from a lot of different demographics. When I was selling the wine, I would sell it to people in oil and gas or people in pharmaceuticals or all of these different industries. And they liked the stories of Olivia Brion. And so it gave me the confidence to start talking about things that were really important to me, which was stories today of women that I consider superheroes that are making the lives of others better on a day-to-day basis. So Cantadora translates to storyteller, but it also in Spanish kind of has this mystical feminine reference to the word. It could be like a song teller, it could be keeper of the tale, but there's this sort of almost magic element to that word too. So I wanted to use that. So Cantadora is storyteller, and then I tell the stories of each of the women. I really partner with them on these wines. So the one that we're drinking now is it's a Grenache Syrah Viognier blend, and the Viognier is very small. I say 5% on the label, but it's really somewhere between 2 and 5%. I wanted to explore the dynamics of the Rhone fermentations that include Viognier, and doing all, being interested in just doing trials of everything. I did a Grenache Syrah Viognier fermentation, a Grenache Syrah fermentation, and I did all of them separately too, so that I could have controls. Wow. So then I could do the blend at the end of, prior to bottling, so that I could really see the impact on the tannin structure of, those different fermentation kinetics. And so I really liked how it layered together. I did not like one fermentation versus another. It wouldn't be a technique I use on, a small yielding vintage, but a big yielding vintage like 19, it was a really fun thing for me to play with. So this wine that you're drinking now is Grenache Syrah with a tiny bit of Viognier, but made with these different co-fermentation and non-co-fermentation techniques.
It's really nice. Beautiful.
Yeah, the thing that's sort of striking to me is that it's not dominated by the Syrah.
Right.
I'm always really careful with, skeptical with Rhone blends where it's like, hey, it's 50% Grenache, 50% Syrah. You're like, well, you just wasted 50% of your Grenache, right? Because the Syrah is going to be the dominant player. But in this,
it's very respectful to the Grenache.
Totally, really light on its feet and bright. Like that's cool.
Well, that's one of the things I've definitely found. To your point, is when I blended the next wine we'll taste, which is over 80% Mourvedre. I did the Mourvedre Syrah co-fermentation and then Mourvedre on its own and Syrah on its own. And I tried to add the Syrah into the blend, but it dominated the flavor profile.
Yeah,
like even at
tiny percentages.
Yeah. Even at like a small percentage, I just could not add it. Yeah. And so, it just fought it too much. Yeah. So I think I like Syrah as this co-fermenter because what it has is a lot of anthocyanin. And so if you're looking to change the mouthfeel of your wine, especially a tannic varietal like Mourvedre, when you introduce all of that anthocyanin at the beginning of the fermentation, and then Mourvedre brings all of that tannin, you just create that polymeric bonding so much faster, and it has more, I think, stick-to-itiveness than if you try to create it later in the life cycle of the wine. So just based on the tannin research I did with Alpha Omega, that silky mouthfeel comes from bonding the color molecules, anthocyanins, to the tannin molecules. And you do that so much more effectively during fermentation and then after it. So that was, we can taste the Mourvedre next. So that, just to go back to the story, so you asked me, how did I meet these women? They all kind of, this initial cohort of women all have this kind of connection to me, whereas, so the last wine we'll taste, the Protector, which is the Tempranillo, that is the wine that I ended up doing for La Casa because I let the women choose their wine. So I asked La Casa, I'd like to make a wine for you. I've come up with this project. I'm going to give 10% of the sales to you guys. Is there anyone in your community that you'd like to introduce me to? So they introduced me to Sonia Malera, who was one of the original founders of La Casa in 1976. And it's important to note that it's the first domestic violence shelter in California and only second in the nation in 1976. So this group of Latino women around Sonia came up with the concept of a domestic violence shelter. They thought that it only impacted their community, this issue, and so they named it La Casa de las Madres because, one, they thought women wouldn't leave because they didn't have a place to take their children, so they put that in the title, House of the Mothers. And then they also thought they were only going to be welcoming Spanish speakers, and so they named it in Spanish. And then when more support in the San Francisco community came from every ethnicity, every socioeconomic background, and, you know, became much more of a groundswell of support. So this was the first woman, was Sonia, which is the last wine we'll taste. And then my mom is a visual artist and was a high school art teacher. And I really wanted to focus, you know, one of the wines on the arts community, because I think that's just so powerful as humans to, you know, what sort of differentiating factor, I guess, for us that we do, we, you know, employ the arts in our lives. And so, I found Cynthia Tom really just through a Google search, because I was looking for an artist who was trying to do something altruistically for women and children. And she had a residency at the De Young Museum in 2011 and took that cohort of women and actually explored generational trauma using visual art. And then from that started an organization called A Place of Her Own, which uses visual art in the healing of generational trauma. And so I can talk about her whole story at great length, but both of her parents were trafficked in the United States in different ways. And that is really the genesis of a lot of those issues. And she didn't discover the origins of those stories until she was in her 30s. So, really the complex, discussions around, she's third generation Chinese American, the immigrants coming over from China at different points. We only have so much time on the podcast, but that's the next wine we'll try is the Morvet. And the one we're trying right now is Marion Page. She's an economist. She founded the UC Davis Center for Poverty and Equality Research. And she is one of only 3 think tanks in the United States that uses a multidisciplinary approach to research and economics to really, create structural change for our communities. So she combines the work of neurobiologists and psychologists and psychiatrists and nutritionists, and they all look at the roots of poverty and inequality. And then she sits on our state's economic council and advises Governor Newsom on our state's economic policy using all of that research. Cool. So she just has so I like talking about her story because she is doing something to create structural change, to create long-term change using a lot of different people as a resource that are experts in their field. And I think that's a great story to tell because it's inspiring to me to know that there are people out there doing the day-to-day work in order to create a better future.
Meanwhile, it's hailing.
It just
started hailing.
More snow.
Meanwhile, grapple. I learned that word that week.
Look out front.
I know.
It's just really coming
my phone
down.
just started buzzing.
Yeah.
I have 17 different weather apps. A strong thunderstorm will impact portions of northern Marin, southeastern Sonoma County, and central Napa counties through 12:15 today. So that's right now. Light rain starting in 5 minutes.
Go ahead, Bart.
Yeah, not light rain. My radar app fail. That's not light.
I have a question about the graphic design on these. There's a gold circle around somewhere on the.
Yeah, so I commission different local photographers, women photographers for the images on the labels. But I also incorporate just a simple circle that really, it's like if you threw it in water and you saw the ripple effect, it's going to hit every community. If you, and that's proven to, it's like if you change one thing here, it has a ripple effect where it hits everything else.
Where is this outside shot taken?
So the outside shot that you're referring to on the protector label, that's from the Marin Headlands.
Okay.
And so when I ask the women, so Marion Page, the wine we were just drinking, she shot in one of the law libraries in San Francisco or in Sacramento. So it's on top of the Supreme Court. So it was, I just wanted to find a really historical library for her as a professor. She's the sage. Yeah. And I actually, I try to put a lot of, different allusions in the labels. So on the right side, I asked her to bring books that inspired her career. So she brought a bunch of different economics books that are here. And then it was an old historical library that we shot in. So we found all of these different old historical labor economics books and different books about, the topics that she's focused on in her life's work. and put them on this side of the label.
Those are good Easter eggs.
Yeah, it's just so it's like I really want to, for these Cantadora labels, I really want to tell the stories of these women's lives in order to, you know, kind of inform their you know, nobody's in a vacuum, right? And so the story is really informs their impact. And it's also where you get your connection, right? We all get connection, you know, a deeper connection to stories than we do to facts. And so the emphasis is really on these stories. And also they're kind of irrefutable, right? So it makes it less polarizing, less political. I think people are more open to hearing the story of, like, for instance, you know, Sonia, we're drinking the Mourvedre right now, right?
Yeah,
Everyone's drinking the Mourvedre.
I need the Mourvedre. I'm in the Grenache. Yeah, and it's also, we haven't even talked about, I mean, we've talked about on the show before Shake Ridge and Ann Kramer, but such classic examples of wine from that vineyard and how you got in. So we got, how long is this episode going to be?
It's only we haven't even hit 1 hour. Would you pour me some of the Mourvedre?
Yeah.
So I have a question. I noticed all of your labels have the QR code on the back.
Yeah.
I'm wondering what sort of feedback you're getting. Do you feel like people are using it? Do you have any way to tell if anybody's using it?
Well, I can track the usage of the QR codes online. I don't do that too much. I really just, I was updating it for new labels, so I was able to check in. There's not a tremendous usage, but it's growing. And I feel like with these particular brands, since they are so story entrenched
and so individual.
Yeah, it really makes a lot of sense for me to be able to, you know, one, I want my label. I want people to pick up the wine and look at the label and be interested. And then when I put the picture with the word, you know, protector or healer or sage, I want that to be intriguing, and then I want them to do this, right? I want them to turn it around and look at the back, and then I have information about the wine, of course, but then also the woman, and then I give them, you know, call to action with the QR code to read her story. Right. I just want to bring them deeper and deeper into this subject that's really important to me, and, you know, kind of differentiates both the wine and the woman that I'm partnering with on the wine. So
let me try the QR code.
Oh, yeah. I mean, yeah.
Did you look it up?
Of course. Yeah, of course. God, wouldn't that be embarrassing if I said, well, it doesn't work?
No, I just...
Good idea.
But
I'm interested in
it went to the prisoner website.
Newfangled technology. All of a sudden, I bought four bottles of $1,000 bottle Alpha Omega Cabernet.
100-point store.
So the Olivia Brion one, like the one that you're holding right now, that goes to the story of the woman, so you can see some of the original photographs of her and read the backstory of the woman along with the Olivia Brion, which is kind of the true Hollywood telling. It's like a fun, fanciful thing that fits on the back label, but the story of the woman's also attached to that.
I mean, what a great way to tell more of the story. Mm-hmm. Is what I thought was, you know,
it just creates
awesome
layers.
About it. Yeah,
like the winemaking, right? We're creating layers.
Speaking of which, where are you making the wines?
So I make them. I was kind of giggling when I saw the prior episodes, because I was like, this is a podcast sponsored by Obsidian Ridge, so I make it at Obsidian Ridge now. I Goldilocks my way around a little bit and then moved to them in 21, and I've been really happy. They're a great team.
Actually, you know, we've never had Obsidian Ridge on. We're going to do it eventually, but Casey certainly has been on more than a few times.
And then Smith Story and
although they weren't. Well, I guess was she on when she came back? She was there. Yeah, the second time. Yeah, they're a good crew there. The cellar crew there is the best. They're awesome.
They're really, really good. They've been there for a long time. They have a really dedicated small team, and their facilities are great, you know, and so I've been really happy with the quality of wine I can produce, for sure.
So you're back in Sonoma.
Back in Sonoma,
where it all starts.
It's over the hill. So we're focused on the Mourvedre right now. So what do you guys think? I like Mourvedre because it's earthy, but I don't like it because it ends on a gritty note. And so I really tried to use the Syrah, that co-fermentation, to create a little silkiness on the finish rather than that traditional Mourvedre kind of.
Yeah, totally. I mean, It's got all those savory,
Aromatics.
Mourvedre aromatics.
Yeah.
But again, it's also like, and I think this is a great expression of the place. It has that lift, that that light on its feet thing that you get from Shake Ridge wine. You saw it through all of Hardy's wines that he was making, all the Mourvedre he was making out of there, and
The wines that Cody makes
exactly
out of there all have
desire
that.
lines, and totally nailed it.
And again, the Syrah is respectful to the Mourvedre. 20%, it could be under your thumb.
I don't think I don't know. Well, the Rossi Odolini we did. It's like 18% Syrah with the Mourvedre. Again, it was a year like 18 and 19,
Right.
where there's a big crop, and you're not going to get quite the same sort of like intensity of ripeness.
Yeah.
But yeah, totally. Like that one's way more intense than this. Rich, Sonoma versus Shake Ridge. But
Yeah, these are very elegant expressions.
Totally.
Of the grapes.
And that's what I like about wine is I'm very careful about the structure of it. When I'm thinking about making it from the pick stage on, I think it was my training with Alpha Omega, because we would sit down and we had a lot of fruit, but we would subdivide it into sometimes just 3-barrel lots. They were very small lots. So when we were sitting down to taste our reds, we would taste 170 wines. And so you didn't have time to taste for anything other than structure and faults. Right. So it would just be flights of 8 real fast, structure, fault, structure, fault, structure, fault. And so that was super quintessential to my training as a winemaker, was just to think in terms of what is the structure of this wine, and how can I keep it as clean to preserve all of those vineyard dynamics as possible.
Yeah. Well, how did you find your way to Shake Ridge? What was it a wine that you had tried from there, or just your search for Rhone varietals?
I was looking for Rhone varietals, and I don't remember, because it was 16. It wasn't that long. It was more, so John Lockwood was sourcing from them, and David Mahaffey had also mentored him. And he was making a Tempranillo, and we're very different winemakers, but I respect his style. And so I think I was just looking for different winemakers and where they were sourcing fruit from. And frankly, I was attracted to Anne because she was a woman. It was very unusual to find a viticulturist who was a woman, a badass woman, right? And so I think that was also a component of it. There was a lot of winemakers sourcing from her that I respected. And then and she has been so wonderful to learn from. Every time I go up and work with her, it's like, the prices of admission is worth it. It's like I learned, I grow so much as as a wine maker, wine grower, whatever you want to call it, just interacting with her. So it started at that point and just carried forward.
It's awesome. It's awesome. Yeah, this is a beautiful wine.
Totally. Great expression of Mourvedre.
Yeah.
And then the last wine we're tasting is the Tempranillo, which is the Protector, where the proceeds go to La Casa. So this is traditional and untraditional in the Rioja sense. Traditional in that it's, a couple years in barrel, predominantly Tempranillo, about 5% Graziano. There's a little bit that comes off of a block at Shake Ridge, and then a little bit interplanted into one of the blocks that I use. But I don't use 100%, new American oak. And like in Rioja, I use 30% French oak on this. And it's, ideally it is a little bit more opulent of a wine than, I kind of like that style of Tempranillo, but it's still tempered in the structure and overall profile of it.
Loving that Mourvedre.
Yeah. Mourvedre's dope.
I always tell winemakers, I'm like, if you're a winemaker, you'll like this one because it'll be fun. It's like a fun playground to think about the co-fermentation with Syrah and then the overall profile of the Mourvedre. It's definitely the one that I always pour for winemakers.
Well, in the Tempranillo, not a lot of people. I mean, we know some people that work with Tempranillo, some from this vineyard as well, but not a lot of people play around with Tempranillo, and so it's kind of a
kind of a mystery wine.
Yeah, I think for a lot of
California,
for a lot of normal consumers, they're not really familiar with it.
back to is the gold circle something they're actually holding, or is that added?
No, it's something they're holding. I
is, okay.
commission
Like a
all of
gold
the.
ring.
They're all original art on the labels, so I
Yeah.
commission the portraits, and then I just have the gold ring that they hold, and then I kind of incorporate it into some of the
cool element.
just to give it some consistency, because all the portraits will be so different too. So
Where is that gold ring today?
in my closet.
You should have it displayed.
Oh my God, we could have done a romper room picture. You are far too young to remember that.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Bart, maybe.
Yeah, I totally, Brian.
Romper room. We used to watch this thing when we were kids, and it was basically like watching a kindergarten class, and she would do little lessons for the class, but she always held up the little ring, and she would
It
say,
was supposed to be a mirror.
I see Johnny and Jimmy. And yeah.
Sammy and Johnny.
I see Movedra.
I see
Syrah,
Grenache. I see
Tempranillo.
Tempranillo.
Yeah, I see about 20% Syrah going into the Movedra.
I see hail and thunderstorms. I see snow on the mountains.
I'm just going into a tasting room in Napa, so I'll make sure I bring the wing. And during tastings, I can put it over my head and play I Spy like I do with my kids.
So tell us about the tasting room.
So I'm just getting my, compliance, exciting stuff
The
done.
best stuff. Isn't it so much fun?
The best, just
Fucking
the
love
best. So I'm getting my compliance done right now, but I'm going to be in Feast It Forward in downtown Napa. So it's right across from Oxbow. It's a winery collective.
With
But it's a really fun space because they have an outdoor, several different outdoor patios and tasting spaces and a rooftop to hang out on, and it's right near the big concert venue in Napa, and
the Oxbow.
it's right near the Oxbow. You can get GOTS. There's always food trucks there, so it's just a really fun space. So I'm excited to just take people there and showcase the wines, and it's just a really she's Katie, who's done it, kind of created the space, has really done a phenomenal job with.
When will you be open?
Well, it's
As soon as
open.
the compliance people say she
As
can.
soon as my deposit is in, so whenever I get my Dupo too, then I'll go in there. But probably I'm hoping for April. That'd be
the
great.
nice thing about that, it's pretty easy
Yeah.
once you have that done, right? Because you don't have to build out anything.
Right.
Yeah,
I looked at doing my own tasting space, but I like being more social, having more options for consumers to come in and experience a lot of different wines in addition to mine. And also it's nice because people can go in and just have a glass of wine or buy a bottle, which is becoming less and less frequent in our respective valleys. So it brings back some of that casualness of wine tasting, which a lot of consumers do miss. And like, especially when I see on the message boards, in the different groups, people really do miss being able to just belly up to a bar and have a glass of wine or buy a bottle and sit on a patio. And you can still do that there. So that's really nice.
Well, so is that a big move for you doing a tasting room? I mean, what's case production? And obviously you're doing most to direct to consumer, right?
Yeah, I do a lot of direct to consumer. A lot of the wines are available in different restaurants in Napa and Los Angeles. So I have in the Bay Area too. Sometimes they creep around the valley. So, but mostly I'm the only one that's selling the wine. And so, in terms of Sonoma, a lot of the wines have been available at Taub Family in the square. So I did my kind of harvest release party there last year. And then you can find them on the list in several Napa restaurants. So almost all the wines are available at Thomas Keller's Ad Hoc restaurant in Yountville. They're also at Soul Bar up in Calistoga. They're at, Morimoto's in Napa, Morimoto Asia, a new restaurant.
Is that open yet?
Yeah, it's great.
All right, cool.
Yeah, so I have several wines that are there from Olivia Brion, and then some of the Cantadora ones are at Enology, and some of them are at Zuzu. So some of my favorite restaurants in Napa. It gives me a good excuse to eat well.
You're getting out and hustling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So-
We're miss on the dings on that one.
Yeah,
Too
so
many,
it's-
too many names to ding.
So I've been I'm really grateful for the support of restaurants. They definitely propel consumers towards me. I get emails from people. I had this wine on the pairing menu at Ad Hoc. I loved it. Can I get a case? It helps for sure. So yeah.
This weather is so wild. Tailing again.
So the Tempranillo, what do you guys think?
One of my favorite things in a wine is when it's just about to be like too much on the palate that it like lets up and releases, and this totally does that, where it's like going, and then kind of goes upward. I dig it.
Yeah,
if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I got you, because if it's too much, it lays heavy on the palate and dries out your mouth.
Right.
And this has definitely pronounced tannin, but it does. It has that lift.
It has that release.
Whether it's
Tempranillo. I mean, it would be weird if it didn't have tannin.
Right.
It's a Tempranillo.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah.
Especially from Shake Ridge, where
where you would think it would be just all tannin.
Right.
But it's very respectful.
Yeah.
So yeah, nice job.
Thank you.
Really nice.
Oh, and all the wines.
Yeah.
I mean,
lineup.
yeah. What is typical price points on some of the wines?
So the Cantadora line price is at $50 a bottle, and I give 10% of the sales back to the organizations the women have founded. And then the Olivia Brion's varies from 30 to 50. So the Taquin is 30 and the Pinot is 50. And then I have some unoaked versions in the Olivia Brion labels too. Like I have an unoaked and kind of fresher version of Grenache, 100% Grenache, with an emphasis on a head train block, where it's like.
And where is that from?
Did you bring them so that you'd come back on the show?
Yeah.
Brian's
well,
going.
Just
I'm
like, yeah, I want to compete with
you.
Casey for Grenache Day. Can you bring us both on?
We'll just bring you. Casey can stay home.
No, have me back. That was the carrot. That was the
well
carrot.
Played. Well, you've really run this show pretty well in general.
You've obviously listened to the show, and you probably have opinions about all four of us.
Can we talk about the wine, guys?
Yeah. Well, the Cantadora wines are really competitively priced, especially considering the fruit sourcing that you got. Because I thought that Anne sort of pushed back a lot of times on people putting the wines out there at a certain price point. Like she kind of wants the wines that are coming from her vineyard to be above a certain level if they're on wine lists. And I don't think she's ever said anything about it to me, to be honest. Okay. I would be forthright. You have I do my own taxes because finance, and I do all my own.
You want to do
cost
mine too?
Yeah, exactly.
Totally.
You're right. I could start a business here. I do all my own cost of goods sold calculations, which is useful in all my inventory calculations, and so I have a really good handle on what I need to price the wines at in order to run a business, because that's ultimately what we're all sort of trying to do, right? And so that is part of it. I try to make it obviously worth it. The juice has to taste that good, but it also has to be priced at what the fruit cost is to me. And so there's
a bit of a math equation there.
Yeah, so it's meeting that sweet spot at this price. Right. I don't want to embarrass my parents' friends and the price of the wine type of thing. It's like I always think wine, these are luxury wine prices. We're just a little bit I don't know, like we get inundated with all these high priced wines and Sonoma and Napa and whatnot, and we're so
the difference is
such.
The difference is luxury as opposed to lifestyle, right? Isn't that the term that Tor used? Lifestyle wines.
I have a different take on lifestyle wines,
right? But okay,
yeah. I mean, I don't think in terms of price when I think of lifestyle wines. For me, it's more like Scribe and Abbott's Passage and things like where it's like more like a brand.
Got it.
I don't think in terms of pricing. But how many different wines are you making currently?
So I make 7 different wines out of the 19 vintage, and it's going to vary based on yield. I do limit my growth because I do only source from organically farmed fruit. It does not have to be certified, but it does have to be no herbicide or no herbicides, no Roundup, and and obviously organic sources of pesticides if they're used at all. So and I definitely try to find places that are building an ecosystem for that vineyard as well. Like my Russian River fruit has the sheep, the dumb sheep that we talked about, and also, but they have bee boxes.
Great name for a label, by the way.
Yeah,
Dumb sheep.
dumb sheep.
Dumb sheep.
Side brand.
Do they ever get offended that you talk like that?
No, they're dumb. They don't even know.
I go check in with them every time I go, and they just bah at me,
Okay. Hold on here.
I guess
Hold on.
what I'm asking is this your only source of income? Like,
yes. So I just do this now. So from 19 on. So I self-funded, so I used the money I was going to go to Davis with and started a company instead. and then started to, I've rolled the capital into my company ever since because I haven't taken alternative sources of funding yet. And so I am, kind of paying into a retirement fund at this point, and then hoping next year I'll have enough to just have start myself on a salary. Right. But it's a lot of, it's an entrepreneur lifestyle. And I listen to, the Guy Raz podcast and stuff to amp me up and be like, no, this is okay. This is how it goes. This is the years that you invest in it. And then you, hopefully have, more control over it later, because you haven't taken that outside sources of funding. And then, you can grow at your own pace. So I'm over 1,000 cases now. And then, but I don't want to grow tremendously, but I would like to grow a little bit. And, but I do need to find those organic sites that I want to work with. So I'm looking at some new sites, newly planted sites that are committing to organic farming now. And so that'll be part of the pipeline in the future, in different parts of California. And I go beyond just looking at organic. I look at sustainability in terms of, does this make sense for grapevines? So should there be other crops planted here, given that we are running into, food shortage issues and lack of water resources and whatnot. So when you look at, I love wine history. That's, always a fun thing for me to talk to people about. And so if you look at the ancient history of Rome, Romans would go into a place and plant crops. And then when they couldn't plant any more crops, they would start planting vines. And that was usually when they started to hit the hillsides, right? And so I kind of have that same approach in California to sustainability. Not only does it make sense for vines to be planted here, do they have enough water to sustain them where you're not, like with Shake Ridge Ranch, Anne doesn't go, she doesn't water beyond the replacement amount in the well. She uses groundwater, well water, but she doesn't water beyond an unsustainable level in the well. And so that's what I'm looking for, because there are parts of California that, especially in the Central Valley or, some hotter parts of California, that they have groundwater, but it's taking it from other essential resources. In California, we produce over 80% of the produce for the United States, so it's a lot of what I'm thinking about in terms of the future of our state and trying to find those places in our state that are more sustainable in addition to being organic.
Right. Good.
Cool. You're getting a lot of applause around here for your attitude and practice.
No, seriously. I mean, thinking about the farming in that way, giving back to these organizations that are so important, and in a really thoughtful way, you're hitting all the high notes for sure. So it's inspiring. We should all be doing so good.
Sustainability is more than
planting
or
spraying Roundup and letting your mustard grow.
Right.
Yeah.
So
what
good
kind
for
of,
you.
Are there varietals that you haven't had a chance to work with that you really kind of want to get into?
Well, there's a lot of whites actually that I'd like to work with.
Okay, talk to me more.
I do want to I love Fiano, and I'd like to work with Fiano. I know that I've been pestering for years George Unti about his Fiano and his Syrah, but someday maybe. And then Peak Pool. I like Peak Pool, but they're hard. It's hard to find organically farmed, frankly. I tried to find it the last couple of years and I just haven't found it.
Hard to find, period.
It's hard to find, period, but the sources I found were not organically farmed. And and then I mean, I think at some point I'll probably do the thing you're, make some Cabernet. That was my, that was my foundation in Napa.
I was wondering too, because that's
Maybe-
like that's a tough game, right?
It is. It's not, I'm not really, I think when you enter there's so many expectations and so much competition, and I'm inundated with it in Napa. So it's almost refreshing to not do it at this point in my career. But I'm definitely not afraid of it. I mean, I really enjoyed doing it when I was making it. So maybe at some point, but I'm really more excited about the varietals that I think, are coming from, Spain and Italy and, maybe even parts of Greece that, fit our climate in terms of latitude and are more sustainable, and that, maybe they're a little more resistant to frost or a little more resistant to, different diseases that we have, or, heat, certainly. So I'm definitely trying to just drill into that sustainability aspect of it and be part of that solution too.
And then are you willing to talk about your property that you have?
Yeah. So I have, my grandfather bought, I think he just wanted to be a rancher or something. He was an engineer, but he bought 33 acres in the Sierra foothills. So I have 30
specifically where?
In Rescue, little town of Rescue in the El Dorado AVA.
El Dorado, okay.
Yeah, so it's El Dorado foothills. It's about 1,200 feet elevation. It's like a 15% grade. It's not a bad area. There's some vineyard sources, like Skinner has some vineyards over there now, and I like their stuff. And I think, I love, and not that it's anywhere close really, but, latitude wise, it's close as, like Steve Easton and Terre Rouge. And I love what he's done for Rhones over the years, of course. And I love Rhone. So it makes sense that I might consider planting it at some point, but, at this point, I just feel like I'm in such an educational phase of my career. It's so, it requires you to live there, I think, if you want to grow there. And I'm not ready to do that. I really like living in Napa and Sonoma and, just absorbing all the education from the people in these valleys.
And there is something to be said about this, going along with your sustainability with, the driving and being able to be connected.
I mean, it's like I would, if I was going to live on a site and produce an estate site, or if I was going to produce an estate site, I would definitely want to live there. And also I'd really want to do the analysis to see if it is a sustainable site for viticulture,
I know someone that can do that for you.
So I haven't jumped into that yet. It's enough to just run a couple of brands and really build those up and create that foundation for myself. And it's only been since 2019, and it's almost, it's been close to 5 years now, but it doesn't feel that way. Every year has been so different with 19 was really all about learning how to sell wholesale for me. That was a big thing. 20, I had a second baby at the beginning of it, and I wasn't willing to die. So I didn't make any wine that year. I was like, and then I just kind of looked smart because of the fires and stuff, which were, just awful. But I didn't make wine in 20. And so I was just doing a lot more consumer sales in 20, where I was doing these really deep dives into like the ancient history of wine, or, I was looking at, well, it really started because, obviously I'm really focused on labels. So I thought the consumers that buy my wine would enjoy learning about the history of labels. And then it was this long wormhole into the history of wine storage, because I was like, well, how do you put a label on a bottle? You have to have a bottle. How do you have a bottle? You have a furnace hot enough to make a bottle, that's a consistent mold. How do you have a label? You have to have lithography. That was in 1799. So we don't really have wine on the table with a vintage with a name on it until, the mid 1800s. It's not even legal to sell wine in a bottle in England until like 1865, because the glass was too brittle before the coal furnace. So it took me through this whole wormhole of wine storage and wine history. And so
we know what you did over COVID.
That was what I was doing over COVID. I was just checking out books from the library and trying to take care of my newborn. It was a good time. And then 21.
Stay alive.
Yeah, exactly. And staying alive. And then 21 was all about, how do I kind of grow this business? What's sustainable? Moving to Obsidian, really kind of creating more of, like a year over year consistency where, with places that I could work and whatnot and produce. And then, then now I'm, tasting room and continuing to.
How old are the kids?
My kids are 2, almost 3, and 5.
Okay.
So little guys.
Okay. So you probably don't have any free time. What do you do? What are your hobbies like other than, when you're not making wine or taking care of the kids? What do you, is there a certain...
Yeah, you said your husband, is he work in the business or
he works
hopefully he doesn't work in the business?
No, thank God. No, he works in tech. So he runs recruitment for a startup. It's a 100% remote company. So it's nice. He can be at our house in Napa. Cool. Yeah.
Right.
So.
And what do you kayak or what do you do in your?
Oh no, I don't do anything. I just work and take care of my kids. And if I do anything, I read. Yeah, I'm reading one of Patrick McGovern's books right now, like Uncorking the Past, and that one is a fun one. But it was I read about wine history, and I usually have like 8 different books open that I pop around.
Check out Tor Kenward's book. I've just been reading it this last week, and it's fascinating. It really is. I mean, you talk about a history of wine.
Yeah.
There it is.
There you go, Danny. There's another plug.
There you go. Send another bottle.
What are your favorite what are your favorite wine books that you've read? What should I read next?
I'm gonna ask Sam that.
Wine books? Read?
I just read Tor's.
I've been reading lately cheesy mystery novels, but they're based in Provence.
Okay.
And all the and so there's like a story and there's like a little like romance side of it, but it's all about the food and wine, and they're like talking.
The chief of police.
I read those first, but he was in the Perigord, Bruno, and now they're in Aix-en-Provence and going to all these restaurants, and the like main characters invested in a vineyard and a winery, talking about Helene's Syrah that she's making, and then they talk about. And my favorite scene in the last one I just finished, they went to a new restaurant, Antoine and Marine, and they noted it because when it was a woman back of house, it was a husband and wife team. The wife was the chef, and the husband was running front of house. And when they brought the bottle of white Shots Enough to Pop to the table, he asked, instead of just like sort of the traditional thing, pouring the wine for the man to try, he asked who would try the wine, and it was like this sort of like momentous scene in this novel. So that's what I don't read history stuff. I don't know. My ADD, I start lots of those books. I never finish them.
It takes me a long time to finish a book because I'm always popping around to different genres, but I don't know. What I love about wine history is that, I don't know, it's just this never ending, like, quest for information. You can always learn something different. Like, I became totally, I was learning about the wine that was traded on the Silk Road the other day, and I became totally obsessed with trying to find this grape that grows over in China and different parts over there called the mare's teat. Have you guys heard of this? No. Apparently it was a grape that it is very long and thin, so I think that's where it gets its name. But in ancient history, it was recorded as being able, it's a white wine, and it's been recorded at being able to age for like 50 years. And this was, before they understood sulfur very well. So I was just fascinated by the mare's teat. I was at a farmer's market in Southern California, like Santa Monica or something, and there was this guy there selling grapes and raisins, and he had these raisins that he was calling finger raisins, and they were these long, skinny, and I'm sure that must have been something like that was making the mare's teat. I'm sure it was a white grape. It was a white grape. He was talking about it. Yeah. So there might be somebody out down. I think he was out of Temecula or something. I'll try and track it down. And I bought a pound of the raisins. I was the only one who liked them. But I thought my kid would love them. She didn't. She wanted nothing to do with them. They're like,
have you been over to the Rhone region?
I've been over there. Yeah, I went to Châteauneuf-du-Pape and I went to Beaucastel, of course, and the south of France. It was nice. It was a wonderful experience, and I took one of the 08 bottles that I bought over there in 15 to dinner for my birthday this year, and it was amazing. When you drink an amazing bottle of wine as a winemaker, and it makes you kind of sad because you don't know if you'll ever make a wine
get there.
you can never, like, it's so conflicting, right? Because you don't know if you'll ever make a wine that ages in that way, and it's so profoundly beautiful, but also kind of makes you sad. So yeah, that was my birthday experience this year.
Fuck.
God damn it, Beaucastel.
I have 2 books for you. One of them is called Water, A Natural History.
Okay.
And the other one is called Real Wine.
All
and I'll
right.
send you links to them both.
Good. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wine and War.
Wine and War.
and
Well,
War.
I
Wine and
told,
War is like a
yeah.
classic,
I told
right?
I told Wine Talks about that, and they did an episode with those people
Yeah,
that
they
wrote that
wrote the
book.
book.
That was one of my favorites too.
That's probably, I mean, as far as wine history and
Yeah.
all the cellars and all the different regions of France and how
yeah.
they hid their, built false walls
Yeah.
to hide their wine from the Nazis, and just
Wine
it's
and War. It's
fascinating.
such a good book. And then,
Yeah.
have you read Tasting the Past?
No.
It's a fun one because it's written by a journalist that kind of like keeps the pace. It's written by like a writer.
So maybe I could have a chance with that one.
Maybe, yeah. It has like a story and whatnot. But it's also a smaller, it's not like the 900-page text.
You're hitting all my high notes here.
Okay.
Thank you, Karen.
My
I'm trying to sell you on this book.
My 2 books
no.
are also thin and
Yeah.
large print.
Really big print. No, so
Are there pictures?
I know, there's
I need
some
pictures.
photos,
too.
There's
Okay.
some pictures. So the tasting the past, I really enjoyed that one.
That's
Yeah,
the one,
that
yeah.
one.
Okay,
Yeah,
cool.
it's a good one. It talks a lot about wine from Israel. The problem that I find with reading about wine from sort of the Fertile Crescent and these areas is I'm really inspired to go there. Like I'll read about wine that's produced, and I'll read about like this. And I'm not like some geography expert. And so I'm constantly being, surprised by where places are. And so I'll read about, I want to go to this place. And it's in like Palestine. And I'm like, oh, no.
Syria.
I know.
Good
Syria.
War-torn valley.
I know. It's like in the radio. And I was just like, we need to help them figure this stuff out so that we can go and drink wine there.
No, there's a winemaker named Stefan de Renencourt, flying winemaker consultant, who told the story about he was consulting with some project that was in Syria, but you couldn't get in there when, especially like this was in the recent past,
Yeah.
and so they were driving in a taxi cab samples from the vineyard to the border.
Oh my
And
God.
then he would like taste the samples and then send his consulting notes back in this I mean, just like, yeah, I don't think that it was this talk about a not sustainable system. I don't think that project
Maybe there was someone in
survived.
Syria that could have made that wine.
I don't think that's working out for them. But it's I mean,
Well, there is something about tasting wine where it's made.
Yeah.
I mean, I love to sit down to a carafe at lunch in the south of France or along the Loire River, wherever we are. That it's so inbred in the culture and the fabric of the society there. It's amazing. And when you go there, I mean, it's all beautiful wine. I don't care what it is.
Yeah.
When Joan and I were talking last night we were in a Leclerc supermarket, and I had already loaded up my cart down the regular bottle aisle. She goes, "Honey, don't you want to come over here? Here's the Magnum aisle." So yeah, I just piled it on top, and it was just so much fun shopping over there because a Magnum of great wine was like $10.
Oh yeah,
it's
it
fabulous.
doesn't matter what you drink in the south of France; it's gonna taste good. It's like when we were in Arles, we would just open like a cheap bottle of even like I don't know, Tempranillo rosé. I mean, they would just use crazy varietals, but it was in like a jar of pesto and some pasta, and it was amazing.
Yeah.
So
I'm
it's
hungry.
just. I know, like it's just
It's noon podcast start
it's so
times.
good. I know. It's just like wine,
Good
wax
wine.
poetic. I will tell one story. So I was in Burgundy, and I my old boss set me up with some tastings over there while I was there. And so I was going into the cellar and I had food poisoning. So I would go into the cellar, taste wine at 8 a.m., come out, throw up next to my car, and then go to the next place. And it was horrible because I did get to taste some like DRC and stuff. But
DRC promptly
probably
I
I was just hiding from everyone. Yeah, I was just like, no, it does taste good. This is such a reflection on you. And then, but it was like I had the most dramatic Burgundy experience. It was like, one, I was very sick, and then two, we stayed in this kind of bell tower. I mean, it's only 3 stories high in Burgundy. They don't let you build any higher than that, but it was the top story in Burgundy, in the town of Burgundy, in this Airbnb. And we had a bat that got stuck because there's no screens, right? And so a bat got stuck and we were listening at night trying to, I don't know, just try to sleep. And we heard this like chirping noise, and we finally went to investigate it. And there was this bat that was just frantically flying around in the living room trying to escape. And my husband and I ran into the bathroom to hide from the bat. I don't know why that was the smart choice. But we were talking about this bat, trying to figure out, I was on my phone trying to find a hotels.com hotel to check into. Like, how can we escape this bat in Burgundy? And finally I realized like he wasn't going to do anything about it. Like he was totally fine with me taking care of the bat. And so I was just like, oh my God, this is going to be my problem. And so I just grabbed this bath mat that was like, heavier than a towel, and came out of the bathroom and frantically waved it in front of me and tried to open the window, of this kind of ancient place in Burgundy. And of course the window got stuck on the drape, the cord for the drape. And so I'm like trying to unwind it and finally released this bat into Burgundy. So my whole experience with Burgundy was like throwing up and fighting bats and like
bats they don't want to be trapped in the house. They want to get outside. Yeah, that's exactly. And they're actually very cool. I mean, we put up a bat house when we moved out here 10 years ago, and it's highly populated. And we used to watch them in Chicago because there are tons in the city, and we lived along the Chicago River. And every night they would come out, and you could watch them and hear them, and they'd swoop and eat like 20,000 insects a night per bat. It's amazing.
Yeah, no, it is. Bats are great, but just maybe not in your house.
In your bedroom.
Exactly.
Yeah. On my vacation in Burgundy.
Yeah, not on my vacation in Burgundy. I finally got over the food poisoning. And then I
haven't slept. And now
I'm tired and sick, and I have to fight a bat. Yeah. So, and on that note,
sounds like it could be, some back label copy inspiration for you.
Yeah, exactly. I can tell that story on my next Pinot Noir. But
yeah, what's coming up? What's your next?
What's in the pipeline for 21?
So this year I have a rosé of Pinot Noir from the Santa Cruz Mountains. That's where my next Pinot will come from Olivia Brion in Santa Cruz Mountains. Bill Brousseau is farming that property up there, so that's nice. And then I have 3 new women for the Cantadora Wines. One, I'm making a Napa Valley Chardonnay. So she asked for a white, and I wanted to make her the penultimate white, so to speak. And so I got some Matthiasen fruit from his vineyard in Napa, and I'm making her a Napa Chard. Yeah. And and then I'm making, and all of the women for the next cohort are just as wonderful. I'm so excited to work with them. One is Michelle Albert. She's the current president of the American Heart Association, and she was formerly the president of Black Cardiologists, and she's the dean of admissions for UCSF. She's the head of cardiology at UCSF. And she started an organization called Nurture, which focuses on health equity. So hers will be the Heart of Gold from Napa Chardonnay. And then I'll have 2 other Rhones. It was a smaller vintage. So it kind of worked out because it allowed me to have 3 women with a white, as an addition, because I only had enough fruit for 2 reds. So I have a GSM coming out of Shake Ridge. And that will feature Janet Spears. She's the CEO of what's called the META Fund. It's METTA in San Francisco, and it focuses on equity and aging. And she's just this wonderful, wonderful woman that has done a lot for the Bay Area. She's worked at several different nonprofits, and she retired from being an electrical engineer at AT&T for 20 years. And then just really fun story. She grew up in Vacaville, so another local lady. And then the third wine will be Nancy Hom. So it's after this initial cohort of women, and then Michelle Albert. These were the last women that I chose. Now it's a baton pass. So Cynthia Tom chose Nancy Hom to nominate for the next label.
Cool. Nice.
Yeah, and then Sonia Malera chose Janet Spears. So Nancy Hom is this artist. Her work's in the SF MoMA. She's, lauded in her own right, but she also has been an activist in San Francisco and been instrumental in the growth and founding of 3 different organizations in San Francisco.
Wow. Cool.
So just, people doing amazing work on a day-to-day basis that I get to talk about and share wine with. And it makes me enjoy my job so much more in that way. So it's a really fun project.
Did we ever talk about, do you give them a few cases of wine?
Yeah, absolutely. I always give them cases,
Yeah.
and then we do events together so other people can meet them and, share in their story and share in their purpose and organizations and whatnot. And I mean, my goal is really, wine is all about community, right? And art and lifestyle. And with Cantadora, that's kind of where I bring it all together for me, is these different women that are doing some tremendous work, but they love wine, they love life, they love, so it can be sad because there are these causes that we do need to support and create change, but it also should be inspiring and uplifting because there are people doing something about it, and you can be a part of that too. So
cool.
Right. Awesome.
I want to nominate my mother-in-law. Worked like 40 years nonprofit in Marin County in the Latino community at Canal Alliance, but she would be amazing.
Gotta get her the baton.
I want to start like highlighting these different stories in a different way because now it is sort of a baton pass, so it's up to these women because that's part of the project, right? They get to see it, be carried forward too. So I want to, give them some compensation for being part of it. So obviously it's wine and some work for their organization, but it's also to bring their community into the project even more. So,
and that's your built-in sustainability on the concept as they pass the torch. It's amazing. Great concept. That's really wonderful.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about where to get the wine.
Yeah. So,
so you can get the wine online. They're all available at oliviabrion.com, Brion. I'm on Instagram, Olivia Brion Wines, plural, or Cantadora Wines, Cantadora. You guys told me this will air on Friday. I'm doing a really cool winemaker dinner next week in Los Angeles at Pacific Standard Prime. I think there's still some tickets available. It's for Wednesday to celebrate International Women's Day on March 8th. So if you're in the LA area, it'll be a really phenomenal 5-course meal with a great restaurant in Redondo Beach, and I'll be in LA for a few days. And then hopefully starting in April, I'll have the wines in rotation at Feast It Forward in the Napa Valley. So right next to the Oxbow Market, you'll be able to taste in the tasting room there.
Cool. All right, you guys, shout outs.
April Fool's Day.
I mean, let's talk about it. We're all involved.
We are, yeah. I had to make sure that I wasn't being spammed or, but I called Sam and said, "Who's this guy? You have an administrative assistant?" No, April Fool's Day.
Tickets are live. You can get the link. It's all over all of the social medias.
Yep.
This is trying to find other events that are like this. There's not really anybody doing anything like this. So this is, it's sponsored by Winery 16600 ostensibly, but we're presenting 12 different winemakers who all buy fruit from the Rossi Ranch. Focuses on the Rhones. I think maybe a little bit of Zinfandel will slide in there. 2 tasting seminars, rosé lunch at the Fairmont, April 1st. It's going to be fantastic. I mean, the tickets it's not cheap, but we're, basically you're paying for lunch and a whole bunch of wine glasses.
Yeah.
And The list of winemakers is insane. Rosemary cake bread with her Gallica. There it is.
Yeah.
Gallica wines.
That Grenache is beautiful.
Grenache is
Wines
amazing.
remind me a little bit of Grenache that I tried.
Oh, thank you.
Elegant.
Tony Biaggi's coming with his new Grenache project that's coming out of the Hourglass facility. Mabon. Frederick Johansson's bringing the Grenache that he makes with Shannon Staglin, the Risa. Artie Johnson's going to be there with his Syrah. Mayan Chachki from Atelier Melka with the wines that they're making for Sosi. Alejandro Ziman, who makes the 16600s. Danielle Langlois with Jam de Bois. I know I'm not missing.
There's too many to remember.
There's too many to remember.
Bart Hansen,
Dane Sellers, Mike Bertou from the wines he's making with Mayo.
Yeah, there's like when was the last time anyone saw Mike Bertou actually in public?
Occasionally in a vineyard with his cool dog, but that's about it. And obviously Phil will be there. MJ's coming into town for it. It's going to be Jamie Kaler, is going to be the MC, the host. So it's going to be
awesome.
That's going to be awesome. 100 seats. Here's the cool part. There's 10 seats available at a basically scholarship price for folks in the industry. Send us an email. We'll get you that information.
So send an email and tell your story.
Tell your story. Send it to me. My goal is so it's not just sort of like there's going to be a lot of industry there, but I want to see some people who are in the vineyards making the wine or in the cellars making the wine, getting a chance to come and sit in the tent and taste through the wines. There'll be a bunch of
spraying out barrels.
Yeah, exactly.
Come do a little edumacation.
Totally. Yeah. So get that out there. Eventbrite ticket is the ticket link. April Phil's Day, a celebration of Rossi Ranch, and it's gonna be awesome. April 1st coming up. So.
Awesome. Can't wait.
Cool.
Can't wait.
Sorry. I was just going to say that your wines are absolutely beautiful. They're elegant wines. And so I totally appreciate. I'm primarily a white wine drinker in my personal life. Drink reds professionally, but
if they're elegant.
If they're elegant, and like I showed you my little
an empty spittoon.
Empty spittoon. I mean, just gorgeous wine.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Awesome. Great to have you. We'll see you back for Grenache Day.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Oh, that's right. Casey's out.
Casey's out. You're off the list, Casey. Sorry.
There's a Tempranillo Day. I make two.
Yeah. All right. We would have the same cachet on this podcast.
Right.
Sure. Thanks for coming. Much appreciated. And hey, the sun's out.
The sun's
cool
out.
is that?
The hail has gone away.
Yeah,
sun is out.
We've had all 4 seasons while we've been sitting here.
The hell with it. All right, everybody. Thanks
Drink
for
more
listening.
Mourvedre.
We'll talk next week.
Sounds good.